And again, that is the lobby of the Trump Tower, where you never know who can descend on that elevator. Already twice today, Donald Trump has come down, usually with billionaires in tow. And we mentioned a little earlier how Jack Ma of Alibaba fame, the Chinese internet conglomerate, and then we had Bernard Arnault of LVMH, the French finance conglomerate as well. But if you count them all up, including the likes of Carl Icahn and Bill Gates and Masayoshi Son, SoftBank CEO, those gentlemen all together represent in excess of $200 billion in net worth. Now, does that in and of itself guarantee results? No, but it is important to get their attention more than it is those in Hollywood. But that's neither here nor there, because those are the type of people who will generate jobs and at least get their friends to generate jobs. Reaction now from FBN's own Charlie Gasparino, a billionaire in his own right, political analyst Catherine Aru, and we've got Sabrina Schaefer with the Independent Women's Forum. All right, Sabrina, to you first. What do you make of all these powwows and whether Mr. Trump should even concern himself with what the likes of a Meryl Streep has to say?
Well, I don't think he should concern himself with what any one individual, whether they're in Hollywood or elsewhere, has to say about him. I think what's interesting, though, is that we're going to be seeing him meet with a lot of these very large companies, a lot of these billionaires, but still we're going to be thinking a lot about how to help those workers who have lost jobs in manufacturing, whether it's in auto manufacturing or in other areas, and recognizing that this is sort of a global phenomenon, that people are losing jobs to this technological revolution that we're having. And so if he can work with other billionaires out there to discuss how to fix that, that will be what the American people are waiting to hear.
All right. Now, Catherine, one of the things I look at when I look at all these other commitments, whether they were timed to appease the president-elect or these are new measures, by my math, we're looking at about 75,000 jobs. If you include IBM's promise of committing 25,000 jobs in the U.S. and anywhere from 25 to 50,000 through SoftBank over the next few years in the U.S., and then the smattering of others. That's a fairly impressive total number, is it not?
Well, yeah, we have to thank Obama for that. Thanks to Obama for the financial bailout, the financial industry is able to turn around and offer so many jobs. And he did start this revolution with technology. When Obama took office, we have to understand that Twitter was just a year old.
Well, then why
Facebook
didn't they do that sooner? If they were doing, if they were firing all cylinder, why didn't they do it sooner?
These things, as the auto companies have said, take years in preparation.
So you're not giving Donald Trump one iota of credit?
No, he cannot take credit. Obama is still in office, and I give credit all to Obama.
So that surge in the market since Donald Trump was all right. So that surge in the market since Donald Trump was elected, you do not owe to Donald Trump?
No, I do not. None of it.
Okay, well, at least you're consistent. All right, Charlie Gasparino, what do you think?
I think Al Gore invented the internet, too. Let's be real clear here. Companies plan forward-looking, okay? Yeah. The reason why these companies are coming to the U.S. and are trying to stay in the U.S. is because they're forward-looking. They're looking at the regulatory scheme and the lower taxes that Donald Trump is offering, and they're saying the U.S. might be a good place to invest. Let's be real clear. When President Obama came into office, I'm old enough to remember covering that, actually, back in 2008. What he did was put CEOs in a room, the people that he needed, essentially, to employ people following the financial crash, and as the Great Recession was heating up, he put them all in a room, and he used to yell at them and lecture them and tell them how bad they were. Okay, that's the Obama way, and by the way, with that way, we got 1.5% GDP growth, about an average of that. Underemployment, lousy wages. Yes, the headline unemployment number went down, but you could poke a big hole in that, okay? President-elect Trump is doing something different. Now, some of this stuff is BS. I'll be the first to tell you. Carrier, there was a little bit of corporate welfare involved, and some of the other jobs. So let me just make this point. The SoftBank jobs were there previous. But give Trump credit for this. Businesses are now thinking, how do we keep jobs in the U.S. because we want to be part of...
That's fair enough, Charlie, but I think it is also fair enough while we're comparing numbers that for whatever reason things are demonstrably better than they were 8 years ago. Whether you want to give obviously the president credit for that or not is anything cool. But Sabrina, here's one question I want to ask you. Given that and given the fact that Donald Trump prefers to go down in the lobby when he is with big billionaires who could help him. Well, maybe Kanye West was an exception, but even then Kanye could help it, but he's having financial difficulties. So that there is a value there in reaching out to people who could make a difference, not Hollywood stars and starlets who could not. What do you think of that?
No, of course. I mean, I think it's important, first of all, for the president-elect to recognize that business, and I think he does, that businesses are ultimately going to do what's best for their bottom line. And so if they anticipate a large corporate tax break or if they anticipate a tariff on imported goods, they are ultimately trying to do what's best for them. And it may be for their public relations image as well. But also beyond that, I think it is important that business leaders and the government sort of talk together, that there are two sides to the ledger. It's not simply that we have jobs in this country, but that we also have affordable goods. And those are both very important things, and one doesn't come without sometimes affecting the other.
But this is very important, what Obama did versus what Trump did. What Obama did, Neil, was simply this. He basically attacked businesses. He embraced Hollywood and attacked business. I'm telling you, he actually called members of his outside economic team, which involved various CEOs, called them and used to lecture them every now and then. Trump is doing the opposite. He's pushing away Hollywood, but he's embracing business. I think, by the way, I'm a frequent Trump critic. I think that's a really good thing.
Well, let me ask you, Kathy, about that it might be the opposite now. We'll have a president who isn't reaching out to Hollywood, good thing, because Hollywood's far from reaching out to him, but is to the business community. What do you think of that?
Well, I would not agree that Obama yelled at all the business leaders.
He did. He called them in rooms and yelled at them.
He bailed them out.
No, we're talking about regular CEOs.
I was talking to Kathy. Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you. There were big bailouts, if everyone forgot about that.
Not every company was bailed out.
And the stimulus plan. So I think everyone's more excited about the corporate tax code and what Paul Ryan's planning to do than anything Trump is talking about right now.
But Kathy, could I ask you this, and you have to be honest here. I know you hate Donald Trump. That's fine.
I didn't say that.
If we did not have 0% interest rates for the last 8 years, do you think President Obama would have done as well with this recovery as he did?
Well, the Federal Reserve, thanks to the Federal Reserve, we're better off now than we were 8 years ago.
That's
so it's
as
a great
close
economy.
as you've come to being
well,
honest.
we got 1.5% economic growth. That's great.
But Sabrina, on that note, now the Federal Reserve is hiking rates and likely to keep hiking rates. Could they be a problem for Donald Trump?
I don't think maybe. I think it's good that for savers, obviously, it might be. You know, there's advantages and disadvantages to manipulating the rates. But I'd say we can't talk about the Obama years and the financial crisis without also talking about the Affordable Care Act and the massive amounts of debt that he is leaving in his wake.
True.
So I think that none of these things exist in a vacuum.
Okay, Charlie, I don't know whether you want to take a bow for this or a knife for this, but Time Warner shares have been tanking on reports that you've broken here that a Trump administration might not be too keen on that pairing.
Yeah, I mean, on your show, on Fox Business, which if you don't get it, demand it. Right?
There you go. Not sold with great passion, but not bad.
Yes, but I'm trying. But, you know, here's the thing, Neil. Listen, he's a mixed bag. I think what Donald Trump could do is he can hurt himself, or he can continue with a tax plan and deregulation plan, which will take up the economy, or he can get involved in mergers and acquisitions and trade wars. We don't know.
We don't know is right.